Reaperman here with another arcade stick review. This time around we have the 8BitDo arcade stick. This is the second joystick by 8BitDo, and not to bury the lead on this one, this is one of my favorite arcade sticks of all time. As usual, this video is chaptered out, so feel free to skip around. First we're going to cover the controls on the stick, then we're going to move up to the stick's features, we're going to move on to the exterior of the case, then we're going to have a look inside the case, and then pop it up on the big screen for some gameplay impressions. And then for this stick, we're actually going to pop in some authentic Sanwa controls and then do some more gameplay impressions. Now, speaking of these authentic Sanwa controls, that's one of the sticking points of this controller. At $99, we start to expect it to come with name brand controls in it, and it doesn't in this case. It comes with a clone JLF and clone 30mm buttons. That said, they feel like very good control. Like I say, it's already one of my favorite arcade sticks of all time, and I will want to compare it to the real deal later on. As you can see, I've already made some changes to my stick to just kind of suit my taste a little bit more. I've removed the ball top and swapped it for a bat top, and I've also doubled the strength of the spring at the bottom to kind of make up for the extra leverage on the stick. I've also added an octagonal gate at the bottom, but that octagonal gate is probably going to get swapped out for a circular restrictor later on when we swap these sticks. Both the clone JLF and the real JLF are coming with square gates on them, which are definitely not my style. Moving on to these buttons, these feel pretty much like Sanwa buttons to me. I know they're not, but they feel pretty much like Sanwa buttons to me. They don't seem to have any excessive play. They don't make any funny noises. They just feel like regular 30mm buttons. Now, I should clarify that I'm more of a fan of American style buttons, so Sanwa buttons to me always feel a little bit vague and imprecise, but these don't really feel all that different from Sanwa 30mm buttons. They just feel about right to me. You also get two 24mm Sanwa style buttons up here at the top for macros. Now, moving on to the stick's features. One of the things I like the most about this is that it's got a lot of physical controls for things. This is a wireless and wired stick, so it's got a switch here to go between Bluetooth and 2.4 gigahertz, so you can either just connect Bluetooth or use its USB receiver. Fantastic that it's got a wired switch or a physical switch for that. It's also up here, it's got a physical switch for what this stick does, whether it's left stick, digital pad, or right stick. Don't have to worry, you can see it at a glance, switch it to whatever you need to. Then the power switch over here has both a Nintendo Switch mode and an X input mode, and when you switch it from off to one of those two, actually the button labels change to match, and that is just the darndest thing. I suppose we should talk about official compatibility here. Officially, this stick is compatible with Nintendo Switch in Switch mode, X input on Microsoft Windows, and also it's compatible with the Analog Pocket. Now, this stick is compatible with other things that are compatible with these types of controllers. I've personally used this with the At Games Legends Gamer series, and I've also used it with my Mister with no trouble at all. Also, in Windows you can use this switch mode and it will come up as HID versus X input, so you get your choice on just a whole lot of things. Here's your connect button for the Bluetooth, and then you got a menu button over here for Nintendo Switch and also for your Analog Pocket. And that's actually kind of a handy thing. I do not believe the Nintendo Switch will wake up with it though. Now, moving on to the case itself. This is a plastic case, but it's actually very heavy, so I suspect there's a very large premium weight stuck to the bottom of this case. That said, it's plastic, but there's very little flex, if any, and it feels very, very premium. It's a completely flat control panel. There's no angle at all to it. Where there is angle, though, is down here on the sides. Now, this is kind of where I grabbed the stick between my legs here, so I was having some trouble with it sliding because it's angled. So what I did was I grabbed some of this dollar store Adhesive Felt, just stuck that on there, and my problem there went away. One of my favorite features of this stick is here on the back, where you've got this little storage cubby for the actual USB receiver. And as you notice, I label them. I do recommend that you label USB receivers for when you get a bunch of them. Now this cubby here is also where you plug in your USB for going either completely wired or for charging the internal battery, and there is still room to put your receiver in there and a little cutout so you can close it over the cable, and everything works great. Absolutely brilliant design there. So now that we've taken a look around the stick and at its basic features and all that, I think it's time that we look inside. So let's get the bottom off. Now I have removed all the screws to this thing already. To save you some time, it takes a T10 Torx screwdriver. Thanks 8BitDo, that's kind of annoying. Let's get this bottom off here. And let's disconnect the USB panel. Have a look inside here. This is an absolutely giant premium weight. This is where most of the quality feel comes from, and it probably helps stiffen this thing up as well as it's screwed in at 2 different points. Moving over to the actual controller itself, we see that all of the buttons are kind of snap-in buttons, and here's the 2 LED panels. It looks like these are they all have quick connects on them. Up here we can see the wireless module, and interestingly the JLF stick down here doesn't have the 5-pin board on it, so that's gonna be annoying. I'm gonna have to deal with that at some point in this thing, but yeah, this is, I mean, it's going to look a little bit like a rat's nest, but every individual button is labeled with a number at least, and your grounds are all connected to each other, so that can't be too terribly much cleaner. Yeah, it looks pretty good in here. Some more cable management wouldn't have hurt it, but yeah, that's what it looks like. So anyway, let's get this thing back together, let's get it up on the big screen, and let's get some gameplay impressions with the stock stick and buttons. Reaperman here with Super C on the Mister, and we're going to get some kind of initial impressions of the lever and buttons that the 8BitDo arcade stick came with. Now they are unbranded, and we do intend to swap them for Sanwas a little bit later here. Let's go ahead and get into the game. Now, as I mentioned before, I do have a bat top, a stiffer spring, and an octagonal gate on here. This is kind of how I tend to build up my Sanwas and Sanwa clones to make them feel just a little bit more American for me. I will move all of these parts over to the Sanwa when it's time to do that. Now, this game feels good, and Mister highlights why the 8BitDo arcade stick here is probably my second favorite arcade controller ever. Oop. Boom. And it's just so good at hooking up to things. However you need this to hook up, it will hook up. And it hooks up to almost every one of the oddball systems that I have tried it on. It does not do very well at hooking up to the name brand super systems that like to license out their controllers. It does officially support Nintendo Switch, but even in X input mode, you will not be able to get this thing to work on Xbox 360, and it is actually hilariously bad on PS3. It gives all kinds of terrible inputs. But as far as the oddball systems, I've used this on my Games Legends Gamer Mini system, and just this morning I was using this controller to upgrade the Evercade VS. So it works on just about anything that you can get this thing into that isn't going to be picky on controller licensing. Boom! The buttons are accurate. They hit every time. There doesn't seem to be any kind of weird noises or feels to them. The same with the lever. Now, I'm not the biggest Sanwa expert, like I say, and I may change my tune when I get the buttons, in this case, side by side, because I am going to be upgrading half of the buttons so that I have a comparison between them. But yeah, these feel like Sanwa buttons. I know they're not, but they feel like Sanwa buttons. They don't seem to have any excessive play in them. The stick feels pretty nice. The switches in the stick give good feedback. I seriously doubt they're Omrons like the authentic Sanwa stick will have. And I think that on the 8BitDo arcade stick, what you're actually paying for is all of those fancy electronics that allow this thing to hook up in so many ways. So you're not really paying so much for the well, you're not actually paying so much for the controls in them, obviously, but you are paying for the convenience of being able to plug this thing into just so many things so well. Okay, and now it's time to do the stick upgrade. As you can see, it's opened again, and I think I figured out finally what bugged me most about this wire is that there's just way too much length to it. And if they would have shortened it up, this stick would look just so much nicer. You know, almost as nice as those little $15 ones I've been reviewing. But anyway, we're going to get this stick out, and then we're going to do the bottom row of buttons here, and then I have a little... For later for me, I have some upgrades to play with my circle gate, bigger restrictor, and some more springs, and I've got some silencers for the buttons, but that's for me to play with later, see if my preferences are still where they were on the Sanwa stuff. Now again, you will need some stuff to get in here and do this. You will need a T10 screwdriver to get down into it, a regular screwdriver to get your stick out. The buttons are actually press-in. On the stick you will need one of these little cheapo cables. I'll link down in the description below, but they sell them in like a 5-pack, and one of the guys at work had an extra one of these and told me I'd actually need it, and he's right. He's right. The pinouts are clearly written up here on the top. I'm sure I'm flashing a better picture of it up on the screen right now, but it looks like the stick is over here, and it's an 8-pin because it's got separate grounds for everything, for each one of the switches for some unknown reason here. And this thing's of course only a 5-pin, but it's very clear which 4 are the grounds, and only one of those really needs to be connected. Alright, let's get this thing going then. Okay, now that I've got all of the buttons swapped in, the bottom row here, I've got the stick swapped in, and all the parts I'm going to take off of this stick, let's just have a listen to the buttons here. And these are all the Sanwa ones, but I don't think I can really hear a difference aside from on this one button a more springy sound to it. So yeah, let's see, there's really about the same amount of play in them. I expect this to go just about exactly the same as it did before, and thanks to the extra wire on the buttons that are messing up the inside of the case, I was able to do the button transplant on the outside, which makes it just a little bit easier to organize things. So I guess maybe I don't mind that it's not the prettiest inside. It's just so shocking when you open up a $15 stick and it's a little prettier inside than your $99 stick is. Anyway, let's get it up on the big screen and get some impressions with these buttons. Okay, and we're back at Super Contra on the Mister, and I've got to say there's more of a difference in these controls than I was really expecting to find here. So first I'm going to go down audibly and roll through all 4 of the old buttons, followed by all 4 of the new buttons here. And there's really not all that much of a difference in sound, but there's definitely some metallic ringing coming off of some of the old buttons that are not coming off of the new ones. Also, where you're going to notice it on the new ones is they actuate a little bit smoother than the old ones do, and I think that is going to come down to the molds that were used, or maybe a finishing, polishing pass on them, but definitely the 4 Sanwa buttons are smoother than any of the 8BitDo buttons. On the stick, it's actually a similar story. We've swapped most of the parts on the stick that provide user feedback. So we swapped the spring, we swapped the octagonal gate, and we swapped the bat top. So really what we're doing right now is we're testing the switches, because that's the feedback surface that is new. And definitely and immediately the Omron switches provide a much sharper feedback than the switches that came with the 8BitDo. This is definitely a little bit nicer experience here, and there's nothing wrong with the old controls. The stick I would notice, but if I didn't have the old buttons immediately available, I don't think I would notice that. And you're gonna know if you're the kind of person that needs to swap these out for the authentic Sanwa or not. It is perfectly acceptable to roll with the parts that are in this stick. They're very good parts. However, these Sanwa parts, there is an immediate upgrade in usability on them. One other thing that I didn't do on camera, I went back and I tried to swap in the larger plate off of the old 8BitDo lever in here, and I do not recommend that you do that. The reason I went back for it is it's physically larger, and I thought there might be some kind of an acoustic benefit to that. But however, the Sanwa stick does not like to have its mounting plate removed, and I do not recommend you try. The 8BitDo mounting plate comes off very easily. If you're going to do that upgrade, I recommend that you purchase the Sanwa stick that doesn't have the mounting plate on it. I had to give it up after a screw and a half of the 4 screws that are in the diamond shape that hold the mounting plate on. It just was not worth the time or trouble, and I'm actually pretty happy with it as is. Another thing is, if you go back through the video, I'm sure I put a note in there, but I put the cable on upside down because I misinterpreted where all the grounds were. Just don't be like me. Put the cable on the right way, and do test it with the bottom still off. Since it's a wireless stick, it's very easy to do. Just pop it in something, turn the stick on quick with the bottom removed. You don't have to have the USB on the bottom plugged in if you are going wireless with it. So yeah, no trouble there. I just swapped it over before I put the stick together, and yeah. So I'm gonna have some links below to I think it was on Amazon where my coworker got that 4 or 5 pack of those little joystick lever connectors, and they're actually for the zero delay joystick encoders. But yeah, it fits in there. I did have to trim mine a little bit to get it to seat down in there properly. For whatever reason, 8BitDo left all 4 grounds in there, and the stick only needs 1. So yeah, that's why that was. Anyway, this is definitely one of my favorite arcade sticks, probably my second favorite arcade stick behind the Moss stick, and I highly recommend you buy one of these, especially if you have a lot of the little micro consoles that are running around these days. The stick feels good, especially with these Sanwa controllers or Sanwa controls on here. But yeah, the big benefit to this thing is how many things that it connects to, and how easily it hooks up to all kinds of weird systems. Like I say, I do it with the Evercade VS and my at-game system, and especially with the at-game system, you're going to find that this is a better controller than the controller it comes with in terms of Bluetooth latency and stuff like that. Usually on those mini systems, the controller is a point where the electronics kind of they aren't the best electronics in the controllers on the like cheap mini systems and stuff. So yeah, if you have maybe an Android box or something like that and you're looking for a controller upgrade, this always is my first go-to to at least try. So until next time, Reaper Man out.